An eerie quiet on the streets of the Sudanese capital. These are roadblocks set up by the protesters. We are told they're an act of defiance against the Rapid Support Forces, the group behind the raid on the protest camp on Monday. The African Union suspended Sudan following an emergency session on Thursday until a civilian government is formed. So far, nothing has been resolved to bridge the divide between the junta and the protest groups.
I think that the African Union has seemingly only just responded because the big powers are. But to me, part of my worry is that on this occasion, the Russians seem to be on the wrong side of history in that region, simply because I think there's an element of global politics in this.
Egypt, the UAE and Saudi Arabia are all countries visited recently by the head of the newly self-appointed military council. Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has called for renewed talks with the protesters, a move rejected by the opposition, who say they cannot negotiate in good faith following the recent killings. Violence escalated on Monday when the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, raided the protest camp outside the military headquarters. The death toll continues to rise. Bodies have been pulled out of the River Nile, with reports of beatings and rapes carried out at the hands of the RSF, the group formerly known as the Janjaweed, who stand accused of committing war crimes in Darfur. It's very difficult to get a clear picture of what's going on. Al Jazeera has been banned from reporting, despite having a bureau in the country. The protesters say they want an end to military rule. And for a fleeting moment, it seemed negotiations between the military and the people may have resulted in some form of change. But it wasn't to be. The military has called for elections in 9 months' time, but no one knows what will happen until then. Stefanie, Dekker, Al Jazeera.
Joining us now on the line from Khartoum is Samaha Al-Mubarak, who is a spokesperson for the Sudanese Professionals Association. Thanks for being with us. What's your reaction to the suspension of Sudan by the African Union?
The suspension of Sudan from the African Union is a step, but it's not enough. We need to ensure that sanctions and pressure on the military council are exerted to ensure the accountability of the military council for the incidents of the evacuation of the protesters violently on the 3rd of June. And the African Union should also be a mediator, should also be sending messages to the European Union and the United Nations to exert the same pressure on the military council. What they have done is a crime against humanity, and it violates the right of assembly of peaceful protesters, civilian protesters, which resulted in catastrophic numbers of casualties. And it is something that is not supposed to be happening at this time and age in the 21st century.
You talked about the need for the African Union to mediate. Ethiopia's Prime Minister is due to travel to Khartoum to mediate between the protesters and the military junta. Are you open to mediation then?
No. What I meant by mediation, I meant the African Union asking or sending messages to the European Union and the United Nations through its links for international pressure exertion on the military council right now. And with respect to mediation, our demands are clear. There is no return to negotiation with the military council. The transitional authority is to be handed over to civilians, as stated in the Declaration of Freedom and Change, and that the participants in the new authority, the military participants, should be chosen from outside the military council.
So if there's no movement on the military council side
any form of mediation that would result in negotiations is not acceptable. The military council it's a criminal council right now, and we cannot and we will not sit back on the table with them. And this is our final stance on this case. What we demand and what we have demanded from day one, according to the Declaration of Freedom and Change, is that the transitional authority be handed over to the civilians.
Samaha, many thanks indeed for speaking to us. Samaha Al-Mubarak there in Khartoum. Let's bring in Eric Reeves from Northampton, Massachusetts via Skype. He's a Sudan researcher and senior fellow at Harvard University. Good to have you with us, Eric. What do you make of this suspension from the AU of Sudan? I mean, how much sway does the African Union hold with the junta?
Very little, actually. It is important that Egypt is a member not only of the Arab League, but also of the African Union. And Egypt has been one of the three countries that has expressed most emphatic support for the military council, the others being Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, both of which significantly today signaled some caution about whether they would be as emphatic in supporting the junta as it has been. I think what we need to do, and this has not been part of the analysis that has been featured in most news stories, is to remember that General Hemeti, head of the Rapid Support Forces and deputy head of the Transitional Military Council, has a 15-year history of atrocity crimes, well known to the International Criminal Court. He survives only in a Sudan that is run by the military. A civilian government would certainly result in his receiving an arrest warrant from the ICC. He would lose the protection that is provided by military power, and he will cling on to power at all costs. The world took its eyes off Darfur, and this allowed Hemeti to grow in power, beginning especially in 2013 with the actual creation of the Rapid Support Forces out of what were the former Janjaweed. He is the main obstacle to any possible negotiated peace. I well understand that the Alliance for Freedom and Change will not negotiate, understandably, with the Transitional Military Council, but I'm not sure whether the African Union, the Ethiopians, or anyone else has any real leverage with Hemeti.
Has Hemeti, do you think, underestimated the strength of opposition and reaction to what's happened by world powers? Do you think his allies in Egypt, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have underestimated it too?
I think that's right. Hemeti is not an educated man. He has not traveled abroad except to recently Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. He has been in Yemen as a commander of the Rapid Support Forces fighting the Houthis on behalf of the Saudis. But he's not a sophisticated man. He's not a political man. He does have a lot of low cunning, I will say. And I think he's sized up a good deal of what's going on in Khartoum. But I don't think he understands that what he could do in Darfur, he can't do in Khartoum, not without provoking the kind of response that we're seeing growing daily. And I would hope reach the point where the generals, recognizing their own survival depends upon removing Hemeti, move against him. That will be very dangerous, however.
Really good to talk to you, sir. Many thanks indeed for being with us. Eric Reeves there in Northampton, Massachusetts.